Hey everyone, I'm Fred and welcome to Value First, the product-led sales podcast, a show where I interview product-led sales and growth leaders who share their secrets on how to grow revenue at SaaS companies. Today, I'm super excited. My guest is Collin Mitchell. Collin is the CRO at Salecast, the only fully managed service offering and end-to-end thought leadership platform. He's also the host of the Sales Transformation, a podcast that shares stories from the best sellers and hustlers out there. Collin's story is a crazy one, full of grit and hustle. So I'm really happy to be able to pick his brain today. Collin, thanks for taking the time. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good, man. I'm excited to come on. I love the intro. This got me a
You
little
went all in with your
up for the
intro,
show.
man. It's
Yeah,
all
yeah.
deserving. Let's just start with your journey because you have an aspiring one. You had your first sales job at 22, VP of sales at 24, founder at 25, and you've been killing it from the start. I just want to get from your point of view, what has been your journey in sales and how did you go up the ranks so fast and make stuff happen for you so fast?
Yeah, in the beginning, I didn't do everything perfect. That's for sure. Made lots of mistakes. I mean, my first sales job, my story kind of goes like this. I was raised by a single mom. We were, poor. We, lived on food stamps, government cheese. We came up short for the rent often. And so I didn't really know what I wanted to do as a kid. I just knew that I didn't want to live like that. I didn't want to live check to check. My dad was never around, so I didn't really have a lot of like positive male role models in my life. Didn't really have anybody telling me that education was important. So I wasn't a great student. I barely made it through high school. College was not in the cards for me. And so I didn't have a lot of opportunities. You've interviewed, a handful of people now. I've interviewed a ton of people. You're typically a lot of sales stories sound something like this. Hey, I went to do this thing, didn't work out, so I got a sales job. Or, hey, I thought I wanted to do this, ends up it was really boring and I actually hated it and I got a sales job, right? So sales is kind of like this afterthought plan B sort of backup plan for a lot of people. For me, it was like I had no other opportunities. There was nothing else for me to do. So when I got that first sales job, I really viewed it as my way out, way out of not living, the way that I was as a kid growing up. And so a lot of it was just hard work, putting in the work, not trying to totally recreate the wheel on day one. And it was just, I was the first one in the office. I was the last one to leave. I came in on Saturdays to get my list ready, send out proposals, things like that. And that took me so far. Right. And so I think there's like an evolution of a lot of salespeople or even entrepreneurs where hard work is required. You learn a lot. You make a lot of mistakes. But that'll only take you so far before you like burn out or you kind of hit a ceiling.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's interesting. How do you think the sales profession is changing? Because you said it when you started describing sales as the only option and people feel like sales is like, okay, what I wanted to do didn't work out. So I went into sales. I think sales is changing and the way people are perceiving is less like car dealership salesmen and more, and it's transitioning to something that's more powerful, more well viewed. How do you think the profession is changing right now with
Yeah, I
with
mean, there is a lot of people doing a lot of good work to change the way, salespeople or sales as a profession is viewed, right? So it's not such a dirty word, or there's not such this, negative association with, salespeople being people that, are persuaders or people you can't trust or trying to get over on you and things like that. There's people that have been doing, good for a long time. It's becoming more popular. But there's still a lot of work to be done. There's still a lot of buyers that are making purchasing decisions in spite of sellers, not because the seller did a good job, not because they, built the trust and rapport and articulated their product and positioned it as the proper solution for the problem. A lot of the buyers are just doing a lot of work on their own and buying things in spite of the salesperson. So there's still a lot of work that needs to be done in the sales profession, to sort of adapt with the way that buyers want to buy these days.
Yeah, so going deeper on that though, you've mentioned that it's sales is transitioning and people buy by themselves, and that's the basis of product led growth too. Is your users get to try your product or get to do most of the awareness process before they get into a conversation with sales. I want to dive deeper on that subject with you because I've interacted with you in the past, and I feel like you give a ton of value to your prospects before you even mention what Salecast or what you guys are doing. So can you talk to me about your mentality there and your process of not saying, "Hey, I have this for you, and let me try to convince you," but what are you trying to solve? What are you trying to get to? And let me help you. And if it makes sense to work together at some point, we'll work together.
Yeah, it's interesting because, right, a lot like the word product led growth is often tied to SaaS products, right?
True.
But the funny thing is, and I never really thought about it until we're kind of having this conversation, but we actually practice product led growth ourselves. We're a service based business. So, service led growth, I don't know, whatever you want to call it, but we're adding a ton of value to people on the front end, and we view more like not necessarily, hey, Fred, you're my prospect, but we view it more as a relationship. This is a relationship that I'm investing in, that I'm adding value, whether it's trying out my SaaS product or showing you how I might be able to help you if we work together. There's still the same concept there, right? And so what we'd like to do is, um, we just like to build relationships and help people, and many of those people end up working with us. And then on the flip side of that too, we currently today we manage, produce, and promote about 40 podcasts. And we have other clients that we send on podcasts and things like that. We've launched over 60 shows in a very short time. And many of the people that we work with today were either people that guested on mine or Chris's show, or people that guested on one of our client shows, or people that somehow received some value from us, never actually bought from us, but referred people to us because of the amount of value that we were able to provide them.
Yeah.
And a lot of people are very quick to kind of hold back or not give all the secret sauce, or, keep things, not reveal certain things until a transaction happens, like you pay me. And the interesting thing is, if you flip that upside down, that way of thinking, it can work in your benefit in a big way. You start to build what I like to call your brand ambassadors, right? So if I can add enough value to enough people on a regular basis, even if they're not my ideal prospect, or they don't have budget for me, or they want to go out and try to, start a podcast or guest on podcasts on their own without hiring somebody like us. Well, at some point they might get tired of doing it on their own, and there's a good chance we're probably going to be the first company that they think of. Or a lot of times what happens is they see opportunities out there that they'll bring us to the table on. So
Yeah.
they talk to a friend or a colleague, or even they just see a social post of somebody, hey, I'm thinking of starting a podcast, who should I be talking to? And we get tagged in those posts a lot of times from people that have never paid us $1. Like, we've never done business together,
Yeah, and
but
that's
there
my
was
case too.
yeah,
And that's my case too, right? I'm starting out the podcast, not big enough for me to be a cast client too, but you've laid it out. Like, we had a meeting and you've laid it out all out there. Like, no, like the secret sauce, you've mentioned it to me. You're like, hey, here's where you can improve. Here's do this, do this, do this. And I was like, is he gonna charge me on that? Because it's way too relevant feedback, but you're actually just giving what you would give to a paying client usually, and then when it makes sense. And obviously when someone tells me, hey, I have a big enough podcast and I need someone to help me manage it, obviously I'm gonna think of you. What would you say, and sorry I cut you off earlier, it wasn't
yeah.
intended. What would you say to sales reps starting in the profession and listening to you right now, and giving value before you ask for commitment, and saying, yes, but I have pressure to beat quota. I need to get to, like, it's a waste of time for me to give too much value or to take meetings that are not going to lead to a deal right now.
then get out of sales and go do something else.
Love it.
Yeah, I get it, man. I mean, people have pressure to hit quota. You can't sit on a bunch of networking calls all day and say, how can I help you solve your biggest problem? But you should be dedicating a certain amount of time to doing that. And it looks something kind of like this. So you should be figuring out the people that you want to do business with. You should be building the relationship with those people, and you should be identifying if there's an opportunity for you to help them. Do they have a problem that you can solve? Do they care about solving those problems? Like, that should be within the context of the conversation. But also, sometimes there might be a problem that they're trying to solve that does not tie back to your product or your service. Most sellers in that case walk away. Hey, when should I check back with you? Okay, you're going to look at this in Q1? Sure. Slot you for Q1. They never hear from them. Maybe they follow up in Q1. Maybe they don't. Maybe they forgot, whatever the case is. But can you help them solve that problem, even if it's not tied to your product or service? Because if you can help them solve that problem, when they need to solve a problem that you can solve, who do you think is going to be top of mind?
Oh, for sure. For sure.
Right.
100%.
And this is a huge missed opportunity for a lot of sellers. So because a lot of times it's like, hey, this is not a priority. Great. What is? Right. And maybe that does tie back to your product. Maybe it doesn't. If it doesn't, in a lot of cases, your prospects are typically concerned, worried about the same types of things. So you should be building a network of people or solutions or partners that are complementary to you that could help solve those problems that your prospects have that aren't tied back to your product or service.
Yeah, and that's also the basis of podcasting in a sales intention. And that I learned from you is, hey, you should start a podcast because you're good at engaging with people, you like building relationships, and at the end of the day, build a dream client list that you want to work with and invite them on your podcast. You'll share how good they are, you'll share their story, they're going to get free marketing. And it's also a great way to, like, for example, I got James from ClickUp, the chief of staff revenue at ClickUp. ClickUp is way too big for Blinks to be a supplier or for ClickUp to be a client, but you start the relationship. Now he's on my advisory board, and you get to know people and make connections. And I think the mind openness of, okay, what's your problem right now? Even if I can't solve it, I'll help you. And I think that ties back to personal branding. I want to get your thoughts on that. Because that's something else that sellers can do that has a big impact, that requires a bit of time, but the ROI is not immediate, but it's really strong. What's your thought? Is everyone trying to have a personal branding? Is it relevant for sales to build their personal branding on the side? What do you think?
Yeah, I'm going to answer that in 1 second. I want to go back to one thing. So, this is the Value First Product-Led Sales podcast, right? So if you think about it, and I don't know, there's all kinds of different people who hold back value or add value first, right? In their sales process, the way that they build relationships. Think about it this way. If you're a SaaS product, or if you've experienced trying out a SaaS product, right? And the free version, only takes you so far. You want to use a feature, you get frustrated. That's not a good experience, right? If you're going to experience the product or the person or the salesperson, why hold back anything?
Yep.
You should add as much value as possible, or let them get the full experience, so that then they understand what it would look like if they were to work with you or to use your product. All right. So think about that. Now let's go back to your question. So personal branding for salespeople. Yeah, absolutely. If you have not started investing in your personal brand as a salesperson, then you need to start right now. People like to follow people on social media. They don't like following brands. The average seller has way more followers than the company page, and typically the company content is pretty damn boring. I mean, with some exceptions, there's some, SaaS companies like, Chili Piper or Vidyard or some of these other brands that,
Gone
their company
too.
content is pretty good. But people want to buy from people. People want to follow people. And so you should be building a network of ideal, customers, partners, people that can drive revenue for you in your role. And part of when people decide whether they want to connect with you or not, they typically check out your profile first. And if your profile is not optimized with a nice, banner, a good headshot, a good headline, you're not putting out content. If you haven't put it out content since, 2019, there's a very good chance they're not going to connect with you. So all of the, prospecting that you do is going to be way more effective if you're investing time in, social, in your personal brand.
Yeah, and tying back to product-led sales on what you said there, I think that it's also a very important, personal branding is also a very important part of being a product-led business, because prospects and leads and users are going to interact with your product, they're going to interact with your marketing less and less with humans. But at the same time, people want to do business with people. And if I'm using your product and it's great and I like it, well, if I have a problem, or if I'm trying to expand, if I'm trying to get to another level, I want to go through a thought leader. I want to speak to the expert, which is, I think, why personal branding is extremely valuable. For example, for you, I'm going to use Salecast. I can use tools that you've suggested, like Simplecast. But then at the end of the day, if I have a problem, I want to speak to a human that I enjoy interacting with, that is also a thought leader, which in this case is you. So I think that's really, really smart. Jumping ship here. Not personal branding, but personalization. Something else that through interacting with you, I've been flabbergasted to experience, and I've showcased you in the best email templates for product-led sales, and like the techniques at the end. You're great at personalizing. You share ideas through your community. How would you see outbound changing? Because you send a lot of gifts, a lot of videos. It's time consuming, but at the same time, it's super efficient. What are the best techniques that you're using that you've seen work really well lately for sales reps listening?
Yeah, I mean, the key here to personalizing your outreach is always be testing new things, because what worked for one persona, what worked in one campaign might not work in the next. And it's just so common that people that are running outbound, marketing, salespeople, all of the above, they are always looking for that silver bullet. They're always looking for that perfect sequence. They're always looking for that perfect template, that perfect subject line. And the problem is it doesn't exist. What works for me may not work for Fred. And, you can follow some basic principles or some basic frameworks, but you always got to be testing new things. I'm a big fan of using video. There's a lot of people that say, do not use video on the first touch. And I was like, I don't care. I'm going to test that. So I ran an experiment, and I was doing, specifically on LinkedIn as a channel. I did 4 weeks straight of sending, my max amount of invites, which is 100 now per week, with a personalized message in the connection request. Okay. Which is basically what anybody in sales or sales coaching consulting, with few exceptions, will say. You have to personalize the first message. Right. And so I did that, and I got a 65% connection acceptance. Right. And so then the next 4 weeks, I ran a similar experiment. Okay, so let's go back there for 1 second. So I got 65% connection acceptance. And then the second touch, I sent a video. Okay. And so with that, I only got like maybe 1 to 2 meetings per day through that. So, probably about 7 meetings a week. Then I ran the experiment the next week, sent the connection request, same types of people, same target, no personalized message, just straight connection. I got 55% acceptance, so 10% less accepted. However, the first official touch, other than the connection request, I sent a video, 30-second video, adding value, inviting them to have a conversation, to learn more about the particular thing, and promised them that it wasn't an undercover sales call, right? Mm-hmm. So I added a little humor to it, and I kept it less than 30 seconds. And so with that, I booked like 2 to 3 times as many meetings. I was booking 2 to 3 meetings a day following that formula. So you got to experiment and test what works for you,
Yeah.
your product, your profile. There's just so many variables to say that anybody has the right answer or one size fits all. Who you're targeting, all of these things matter. What you're saying, are you making good eye contact with the camera? Do you have good body language, good energy? Like there's so many variables. I've been experimenting a lot with personalized gifts from Vidu.io. They have a really cool product. They send you this like board, and then you can record the GIFs and put all kinds of cool things in there. I mean, the response on that has been awesome because not a lot of people are doing it. But in 6, 9, 12 months, when everybody's sending personalized gifts, people have been doing it for a while. But when people are seeing that as more common in their inboxes, it's not going to be as effective,
Yeah.
right? So you constantly got to be testing new things.
And it ties back to standing out from the crowd. I think your example with sending that personalized message versus not, and then the second touch is the video. Well, most connection requests with a personalized message, yes, they get accepted, but people feel like you're going to pitch right away. So I think that's a great experiment. And I've seen things like no subject lines also to just stand out from the noise, just no subject lines. I think that's super smart.
Yeah.
Do you think automation, though, like you're speaking about not doing what everyone else is doing. In the
Yeah.
last 5 to 10 years, we've seen like email automation and people sending automated messages. A lot of your touches are manual, are high touch. You spend the time to record a video. Do you think we're at the end of automation? Do you think it's shifting to like enabling sellers, but the actual touch is manual?
So I think that there's still a place for automation. The problem is sellers have become too dependent on it. They're just running sequences with the boilerplate templates that their company or their organization has provided them. They're not using any creativity. They're not adding any personalization, or they're not adding any manual steps. So, and also it highly depends on like, so we use a company that provides us data where they actually rank people on uh, what steps would be more recommended in a sequence based on some different factors, right?
Yeah.
So they call and verify these leads to see if they're people who actually pick up the phone, because if they're people who actually pick up the phone, then we're going to have a sequence that's heavier with phone touches. If they are people that are very active on social media, then we might have more social touches in that sequence. And then there's people who, maybe they're not that active on social. Maybe they don't pick up the phone. So we might have a more of a blended sequence, or it's, because it's a bit of a mystery. We don't know
Interesting.
if they're going to respond on phone, email, or social, right? So you can't just treat everybody the same way because people are different. They're going to respond on different channels. You should be using as many as possible. You should have an idea of where somebody might respond better and adjust your sequences based on that. But here's one key ingredient. Yes, automation is great, but you can't become too dependent on it or too reliant on it, because you're going to flatline, and you're not going to understand why you're getting 5% reply rate
Yeah.
or lower. And so here's the key: is adding manual steps. Every tool out there should have the ability to add manual steps. If yours doesn't, start shopping for a new tool, because that's how you're going to increase conversion on your sequences. And what is a manual step? A manual step is just a task that's, hey, send a custom video, engage with them on LinkedIn, send them a personalized video, send them a personalized GIF that takes 5 seconds to create. Do something that can't be automated. The non-scalable activities, insert those as manual tasks into your sequences to increase conversion.
Yeah, I agree. The best sequences that I've ran in terms of response rates and meetings books were some automated emails with personalization and nudges or hooks. But again, there was always a manual step where I would send a quick video, or I would really personalize that email and make it look, or maybe a Venn diagram works well. So I agree with you completely. The last subject I want to touch on, because I have you in front of me, and I think we need to talk about well-being for sales, because you're an advocate for well-being. Your story is an incredible one of hustle, of grit, of going through hard times. And I think both on the individual rep and on the sales leaders, there's not enough people talking about well-being, and it's an issue because the sales job is a really stressful one. So I just want to get quickly before we get into the quick fire questions, what are some of the techniques that you use? And you've talked about it on your LinkedIn and podcast, so I don't want to make you repeat all of that, and I'll add the links below. But what are some quick things that have really helped you as a sales leader, either you personally or your teams, in terms of?
Yeah. So it all boils down to one simple thing. And if you want to do better in sales, it's not about taking the latest course or reading the latest sales book on the bestseller list or buying the latest course from your sales influencer. It's all about investing more in yourself personally. And that's different for every individual. So what does that mean? Well, making sure you're getting proper sleep, eating healthy, exercising regularly, meditating, journaling, whatever, taking time off. All of these different things that are things that you should be doing on a regular basis. You got to treat, if you're a sales person, you should treat yourself like an athlete so that you can perform at the highest level when you're in your role. There's all kinds of hacks that I implement. I do intermittent fasting. I drink over a gallon of water a day. I stand all day. I do push-ups throughout the day. I swim in the morning. I journal
Wow.
somewhat consistently. I meditate in the morning throughout the day. I mean, there's all kinds of things that I do. Like people talk about their golden hour or their morning routine. Like my routine starts the night before with, eating healthy, spending time with my family, going to bed early. And then the routine starts in the morning, and it's like I'm up 3 hours before I get to the office because of all the things that I do. And that might be like, whoa, I can't do all that. But even if you just do some of those things, and you start to integrate more things, you will start to see that the more you invest in yourself personally, the more you will crush it professionally.
Yeah, I've implemented just a 15-minute meditation throughout my day, and it really like skyrocketed my productivity in the afternoons. So I completely agree with you. Do you think sales leaders need to enforce it more though? Because I feel that that's like paradoxical of sales leaders having the view of always pushing for quota for more deals, but at the same time
I mean,
they need to push for well-being for the reps, right?
the more that you invest in your team as people and not just as sellers, the happier they will be, the better they will perform. Right. So,
Yeah.
I think a lot of sales leaders, in the past and still some today, were a little bit scared to like give their team too much autonomy or too much freedom. And, with COVID and people working remote and all of these distributed teams, schedules are more flexible. People are not commuting. So it's really, put the sales profession in a different environment where it is a lot easier to hold space for people to, take better care of themselves.
Yeah, yeah, completely agree. All right, man. It was a great chat. I need to leave you alone for today, but before I do, 4 quick fire questions. You answer them as fast as you can. You ready?
Let's do it.
All right. What have I not asked you that you think I should ask?
You should ask me. Ooh,
Tough one.
this is not too rapid.
No, that's not a rapid one.
um, you should ask me where people can find my podcast.
Where can people find your podcast?
Salestransformation.fm, or they could search Sales Transformation on whatever platform they're enjoying this on.
There you go. Which CEO or founding team do you look up to and why?
What CEO or founding team
Do you look up to?
Ooh, I'm gonna flip this one on you a little bit. Not necessarily CEO or founding team, but there's a seller that I have a ton of respect for that came on my show and is doing a lot of good work for people investing in themselves personally in mental health and wellness. And that's Brandon Fluharty over at Live Person, who's a 7-figure earner.
Great answer. I'm going to look him up for sure because I didn't even know him. So we'll definitely look him up. All right. Third question. What's the most underrated tool, growth technique, or skill for sales, in your opinion?
That's hard. Skill, tech, tool, like I don't know which angle to go there. I'm gonna go with Ample Market. Ample Market is a sequencing tool that most people don't know about. And think of sales loft outreach on steroids.
Wow. Nice. We'll add the link below. Something you wish you knew when you were 20.
When I was 20. Ooh. I wish I would have known See, at 20, man, 20 years old. I don't know. What do I
30.
wish I would have known at 20?
I don't know
Oh.
how old you are, though. You don't look a lot older than 30,
I'm
though.
20. Don't you know I'm 20?
Yeah, I'm 23, man.
Yeah, I don't know. Something I wish I would have at 20. I think at 20, I wish I would have known how much, having a mindfulness practice can benefit you in many different
Yeah.
ways.
Amazing. Well, Collin, thank you so much for taking the time to be on this podcast. I think listeners will get a lot of value from hearing your story and your techniques, your advice for sales and the world of SaaS in general. If people want to learn more about Salecast, they can go to salecast.co. I'll add the link to your podcast below. And what's the best way to reach you?
Best ways to just check out the podcast, sales transformation, whatever you're listening to this episode on today, search it out. We drop 5 episodes a week. That is the best way to find out what's new and exciting with us.
All right, man. Thanks for coming. Have a good one.
Thank you.
See ya.